I start, I always start with a joke. And the joke isn't funny, just like John said. If it were funny, I'd be on late night and not here. But it's somewhat relevant. So String walks into a bar. Bartender tells him, get out of here, we don't serve strings. String is really upset, leaves the bar, comes back again. Bartender says, hey, aren't you the same String who just walked in? And the String says, no, I'm afraid not. Okay, so what the String needs, you'll get it eventually. What the String needs is some sort of deniable encryption. He needs some way of being able to convince the bartender that he's really the String. Okay, but that's not really relevant. Before we go on, okay, so why listen to me? Well, this is all part of a broader effort on smartphone security, supported by the NSF, so I need to have the mandatory disclaimer. And I guess the ultimate reason to listen to me is that, at least for now, I'm the only one talking. So I'm going to start with the main idea. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's out there in the research community. I'll tell you the core technology. The core technology is fairly sophisticated. I'll give you the basics, and there's a white paper out on the webpage you can look at if you want to get some more details. I'll tell you a little bit about our implementation, and the implementation is also available in source code. I'm not stupid enough to put a binary out at Black Hat, but if you want one, you can also email me. And then when we get tired, we'll talk about some conclusions. All right, so what's the main idea? The main idea is I have a particular encryption, some random collection of characters. I want to be able to decode it in 2 or possibly more different ways, depending on which key I present. So if I present one key, then this little mess here becomes to make Coke mix caffeine with citric acid and water. And just to be clear, since I know we're in Singapore, I'm talking about the drink Coke. And just so that there's no confusion. And the other key, if I present it, produces the other text to make Coke mix coal with heat and water, which is another type of Coke. Okay, and so what I'd like to have plausible deniability about which particular text I'm sending. Okay, so you might say deniability, lying, that's bad, a whole bunch of people that did bad things and got in trouble. But let me try to give you at least some motivation for why plausible deniability might be a good thing. So here, let's consider this sad-faced person, let's say some executive, maybe a Coke executive, who's carrying some secret plaintext, the recipe for Coke, with him in his industrial secret bag while he goes to a country that maybe is not particularly safe. Okay? And he carries the encrypted version of the recipe. The rumor had it that at least at one point only 3 executives from Coke had this recipe and they all had to fly separate planes. But let's say he's going to this country with his secret and he's attacked by pirates or government or whoever else might be there at this evil country. He would like to be able to decode his encrypted message in front of these people under coercion and show them that really it's very innocuous. All it says is how you make Coke by mixing coal with heat and water, while hiding his actual plain text and keeping it secret. Okay, where else do you see this kind of, what other applications might you see? An obvious application is in secure storage, and I'll detail a little bit about what's done in this already. So let's say you're a human rights activist somewhere, and you have your dissident network on your computer. You don't want, obviously, since they're dissidents, you don't want to have to give them up if for some reason you're cornered by thugs or what have you. You want to be able to plausibly decrypt your dissident network, encrypted dissident network, and make it seem like a social network or something else. Electronic voting, let's say you're in a country that's trying to vote to secede, or part of it's trying to secede, hypothetically, and the national government is trustworthy, but the regional government is not. Okay? And so everyone does their voting thing, and you have your receipt, your electronic receipt. You want to be able to, when the regional lords or whatever come over and ask you who did you vote for, you want to be able to demonstrate to them that you voted for them, but the vote that you sent to the national government gets counted in the way that you really wanted it. And last but not least, censorship is an obvious application where you're trying to send information stenographically by a sensor. Okay. Another more questionable application, potential application, this is suggested by David Starobinsky, a colleague of mine, is deniable logs. Okay, let's say you have a file system and you're doing things on it like removing files. Okay, and if we had the nice PowerPoint, you'd actually be able to see this. You might want the one version of the logs to say that you have listed a file and another version to say that you have removed a file. And so, you know, if you need to show it to an auditor you don't trust, you can show them that you didn't do anything to this file, but if you need to show it to someone else, you can. And I suppose you can use it for creative accounting, although I think most of that will be illegal, so that's not a good idea. Creativity and accounting, I was told several times, do not go well together. All right, so let me detail a little more technically what our solution is. You have a plain text, and it's really hard for you to see this, I guess, but the slides are also available online. You have a plain text that you want to be able to store. You have a decoy or two decoys. So the plain text in this case was to make Coke, mix caffeine with citric acid and water. One decoy might be how you mix coal with heat. Another one might be to make smoke, you mix coal with acid and water. Okay, so you have plain text and some decoys. You want to be able to put them all together with this core technology. And each text that you're trying to encode will get a different key. Okay, key 1, the one all the way on the left, will decode to the original plaintext. Key 2 will decode to the first decoy. Key 3 will decode to the second decoy. And maybe after you've encrypted it, you might also want to be able to put in another decoy text. Okay, key 4. And so you might be able to do that even after you've encrypted the text. So is everyone clear on what I'm trying to do here? Kind of looks like it. All right, good. Our particular solution, and I'll go into it in a little more detail soon, features reasonably short encrypted text, roughly n log n bits, allows incremental modification of the encryption, has a short key, roughly logarithmic. Okay, you can plan ahead for the decoys, or in some cases you can also generate decoy text after the fact. Okay, so what's out there? There is a lot of stuff out there that's similar. In the disk encryption world, there's the famous rubber hose file system written by Assange, Dreyfus, and Weinman. And ironically enough, there's very little literature out there on how it actually works, but it's no longer maintained officially, and unofficially, I guess this is part of somehow related to WikiLeaks. There's FreeOTFE, which is another attempt at doing something like this, which I think is also not maintained, and their website no longer is owned by them. There's StegFS, which is a follow-on to Rubber Hose File System by McDonald and Kuhn, based on some academic work by Anderson, Needham, and Shamir. And there's TrueCrypt, probably many of you have heard of. TrueCrypt is a pretty neat concept. There are several different modes, but in one mode, what TrueCrypt does is it takes all the free space on your hard drive and fills it with random bits. And then if you want to hide a volume in those random bits, you simply encrypt a volume and put it in the free space. Okay, and because it's encrypted, it's in theory indistinguishable from random text, from random bits, sorry. And so therefore someone looking at the volume doesn't know whether your free space is hiding a hidden volume or not. Okay, so there are also some solutions out there. The simplest one is the so-called one-time pad. Okay, the one-time pad, you take the text that you want, you generate random characters, which is the key up top, and you add the key to the text character by character to get a encrypted ciphertext. Okay, and the nice thing about this is you can decode this ciphertext to any plain text you want simply by choosing a different key. Okay, so whatever text you want to decode this to, you simply XOR or add these or subtract these two character by character to get the key that you need to get there. The problem is that the key is very long. It's at the same length as the text that you're trying to encode. So this is not a feasible solution. Yeah, that's good. This is the version 2. So that's good. I just wanted to make sure you're awake, or at least I'm awake. The keys should have been different. There is also some nice work in academic literature. The founding work on this was called Deniable Encryption by Canetti, Dwork, Noer, and Ostrovsky. They look at a slightly different model where you encrypt with random bits, and you want to be able to decrypt a different message with different random bits and prove that that was the message. There's another version of this called, should be practical deniable encryption, and by deniable. There's a whole lot of academic work on that. Okay, so let's get to the core technology. And again, I'm going to try to cover this at somewhat high level. And if you're interested in any of this, feel free to go in deeper, but I can easily give you an entire week course on just this material. So I'll try to be high level. Okay, there are 3 core technologies, most of which we've developed at some level. Set reconciliation, string reconciliation, unique decoding. All right, so let me go over these one by one. Oh, is this good? Okay. I saw my calendar popping up. One of the most embarrassing talks I ever had, was a calendar message popped up in the middle of the talk in front of hundreds of people with some personal information about the speaker. Anyway, all right, so the set reconciliation problem. You have Alice and Bob, and each have a collection, a set of data. In this case, it's a phone book with names and phone numbers. Okay? And what you'd like to do is figure out what the differences are between Alice's and Bob's phone books using as little communication as possible. Okay? In this case, if you stare at it really hard, you'll see that Alice has one extra person, T homeless H, that Bob doesn't have, and Bob has DS cowboy that Alice doesn't have. Okay? And so the question is, how do you do this with a minimum amount of communication? And the big idea is that you encode the data as polynomials. Okay? So you take your set, has elements x1 through xn, you encode it as a polynomial, z minus x1, z minus x2, z is a variable, z minus x3. Okay? Bob does the same thing. And the key insight here, and if I'm losing you, I'll be back in a minute. Okay? The key insight here is that if you divide the polynomial of Alice and Bob, okay, all the common set elements disappear. Okay, the numerator and denominators cancel out, and you're left on the numerator with all the set elements that Alice has that Bob doesn't, and on the denominator, all the things that Bob has that Alice doesn't. Okay, so this is a rational function. You can interpolate it with a number of points. That's the degree of the rational function. And the punchline here is Alice and Bob can figure out how many differences they have with a communication that depends only on how many differences they have between them. Okay? So Alice can have 20 million entries. Bob can have 20 million entries. If they have one difference, you need to send roughly one piece of information for them to figure out the differences. Okay? Another problem that's important to this is the string reconciliation problem. Here, Alice and Bob each have a string rather than a set. Okay, the key difference is in a string, the characters, the order matters, and in a set, the order does not. Okay, and again, we want to figure out what are the differences between the two strings with as little communication as possible. And in academia, what we like to do is we like to take a problem we don't know how to solve and make it look like a problem we do know how to solve, and then, well, we solve that problem. Okay. So in this case, I just told you how we did set reconciliation. And so what we're going to do is we're going to convert the string reconciliation problem into a set reconciliation problem by using something called shingling. I'm going to take the first 3 characters of my string, I, F, and space. Then I'm going to take the first 3 characters starting at the second character, then the first 3 characters starting at the third character. I'll take all possible 3-character substrings of Alice's string, and all possible 3-character substrings of Bob's string. Okay? And lo and behold, those form a set. And I already know how to reconcile sets. So I'll reconcile the sets. Okay? The problem is that at this point, Alice will know the set of substrings of Bob and vice versa, but she won't know what the string is. Okay? And the reason is that there might be several ways to put those substrings together. So for example, if we have katana and Kannada, if you look at their 2-character substrings, they look the same, okay? But you can decode it into either one. And so we need some tricks for how to figure out how to make sure that there's only one decoding. All right. So that was 3 papers in about 3 slides. But let's go to the actual implementation. So if I want to encrypt my plain text, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and here you can follow it on the right. So my plain text is to make Coke, mix caffeine with citric acid and juice. Okay? I can split it up into these shingles. Okay, pick some of those shingles. Generate a polynomial out of those shingles. Remember the z minus elements. Okay? Evaluate that polynomial at several points, and my ciphertext is going to be simply the evaluation of the polynomial at those points. Okay? My key is going to be some of the shingles. I know you can't see it because PDF has it. It's at the bottom there. Okay, so my ciphertext is evaluation of polynomials. My key is the shingles. Okay, to decrypt, I will take my key and evaluate its polynomial, and it's as if I'm doing a reconciliation problem. Okay? I will reconcile those points with the values I got from the ciphertext and reproduce the string. If I want to deceive you, I will create a different key, which is different shingles. Okay? And we will reconcile it, and you'll get a different set of shingles, which will be put together into a different text. Okay. We have some implementation details just to show you. I took Heroes of the Computer Revolution by Stephen Levy. Looked at the text size, the cipher length, and the key length. And what you can see is that the key length doesn't grow very much, but the cipher length does. It's pretty big. Okay. At least in this implementation. Okay. So, let me just summarize what we have here. I have a technique where you can encrypt your text, okay, with one encryption, and that encryption can be decrypted into many different possible texts. The text that you had in mind, and possibly a whole bunch of other decoys, depending on what key you use. The implementation that I have and the code that I have available is based on 3 works that we have. One on set reconciliation, string reconciliation, and unique decoding. The security here is information theoretic in nature, meaning the adversary has no way of knowing, has no way of proving that you had one text versus another unless he has some side information. Okay, and you might and not all, and you can generate a whole bunch of decoys. Not all of them might be meaningful. There are also limitations on this work. It's slow. Okay, it needs some good engineering if you wanted to make it really practical. The keys can be made shorter. You can encrypt in blocks rather than an entire text. There's a whole bunch of references together with Creative Commons refs. And the most important slide was the last one, which contained, let's go back to the beginning. Yeah, just this information, and I'm happy if you have any questions, feel free to email me. The code is all available, the source code is all available online. And if you mention anything about this talk, I will probably deny it. Thank you.